Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the GRIPS Forum. My name is Narushige Michita. I teach International Security Affairs at the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, or GRIPS, based in Tokyo. And I'll be serving as your host today. The war in Ukraine is causing a major impact on the world energy environment. The European Union has banned the import of coal from Russia and is discussing a ban on oil and possibly natural gas import. Combined with the climate change mitigation measures agreed at COP26 in Glasgow last year, the war in Ukraine may accelerate the energy transition. Will the EU further expand the use of renewable energy? Is Germany going to reverse its nuclear phase-out policy? Should Japan resume the operations of additional nuclear power plants? Today, we have invited Mr. Nobuo Tanaka to answer those questions. Mr. Tanaka is CEO of Tanaka Global Incorporated and has served as Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, or IEA, from 2007 to 2011. While at the IEA, Mr. Tanaka played a critical and personal role in strengthening the IEA's ties with major non-member energy players such as China and India. I will ask Mr. Tanaka to speak for about 45 minutes, and we will have a Q&A and a discussion session after that. The presentation and the discussion in this session will be on the record. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Tanaka.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to listen to my presentation. I'm Nobuo Tanaka. I'm very much delighted to be invited to GRIPS to talk about energy security, and especially after the Ukraine situation, the geopolitics of energy and transformation toward carbon neutrality. These challenges for the energy sector is enormous now. But it's a great opportunity for everybody. As my experience in the IEA, International Energy Agency, I learned a lot of politics of oil companies and consumers, oil producers like OPEC countries and consuming countries. So this geopolitics is the feature of the IEA. Let me check to move this one. Okay, yeah. This is the oil prices since 1970s to the current level. It's always up and down. IEA was created at the first oil crisis in 1974. And its role is energy security, but particularly in the oil security, petroleum security, how to secure the supply in case of emergency, like war, or general strike, or typhoon, or hurricane. And keeping the 90 days of net import by the consuming member countries to maintain the strategic stockpile of oil and use it in case of emergency. That's the role of the IEA. IEA in the history released special reserve, strategic reserve 5 times. The first one is the Gulf War, when the Iraqi invaded Kuwait. The second time is Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf of Mexico of the United States in 2005. And the third time is Libyan crisis in 2011. That was when I was executive director. And most recently, twice, due to the Ukraine situation. This is the historical chart of the strategic stockpile, how big the strategic stockpile of oil be. It's about the 1.6 billion barrels as a whole in the public sector. So when you release 2 million barrels per day, it can continue 24 months. When it's 4 million barrels per day, it's sustained about a year. This is the level of disruption in the history. Biggest disruption is the Iranian crisis, about 6 million barrels per day. And the Russian crisis, or this time Ukraine crisis, causes Russia to stop producing about 3 million barrels per day. So it's very big disruption relative to the other cases. The biggest potential risk of the oil supply disruption is the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, of course. If there's something wrong happens and block the trading of the Strait of Hormuz, about 60 million barrels per day will be lost. So that means 60 million barrels is by far the big amount. So it can continue, the IEA can maintain the supply for a couple of months probably, but physically releasing 60 million barrels is impossible. So this is a nightmare scenario for the executive director. But blockage of Hormuz Strait is not only oil, because lots of natural gas or LNG is going through the strait. Particularly Qatar is very important. The Qatar is one of the largest exporter of gas by LNG, and Japan import a lot from Qatar. And Chubu Electric Company is depending on its source of electricity, 40% to Qatar. Means if supply of gas stopped, Chubu Electric will lose 40% of electricity within 20 days, because stock which is flowing by the tanker will terminate within 21 days. So strategic stockpile of oil cannot help the gas. But one of the ways to avoid the disruption could be using the nuclear power plant for the Chubu Electric, which was stopped or shut down by the then Prime Minister Naoto Kan in 2011 after the Fukushima accident. So current energy security is very comprehensive. It's not only oil, but gas is certainly very important part of security. But at the same time, nuclear power can help to avoid the disruption. So we have to think, and IEA is moving toward more comprehensive energy security measures now. This is the level of production of the three major oil producers. Oh, excuse me. This red line is Saudi Arabia, dark blue is Russia, and light blue is the United States. Now the United States is the largest producer of oil, thanks to the shale oil revolution. Russia is enjoying the very steady level of production because Russia is a kind of free rider of the very high prices maintained and adjusted by the Saudi policy of swing supplier, so-called. But Saudi Arabia somehow noticed that by maintaining the high prices, it benefits not only Russia, but United States. US shale enjoy the very high prices and increased production, and now the largest producer. So OPEC, the Saudi Arabia and Russia, made a OPEC plus and try to adjust their production level and keeping the price as high as possible. So this coalition is still there. There's almost a crisis after the COVID-19, because with COVID-19, the demand for oil disappear. So 3 countries, including US, should join together to adjust the level of production and keep the price back. That Mr. Trump persuaded Mohammed bin Salman of the Saudi Arabia and President Putin to join the force to reduce the production after COVID-19 hit. This is Henry Kissinger. He is the founding father of the IEA. I met him when I was elected as executive director and talk about what do you think the IEA should do, or new executive director of the IEA I should do for the IEA. His answer is, Mr. Tanaka, you have to convince China and India to join the IEA, because demand of IEA countries will decline as this, while demand for China and India will go like this. So even IEA countries try to maintain the stability of oil market by themselves. No way to do that without collaboration with China, India. So if IEA wants to continue to be the energy security platform, you should gain China and India. So I asked Henry Kissinger, please help me to convince China, India. He tried very hard. We came almost halfway. They are now the kind of observer, so-called association member. And India, in fact, requested the full membership about 2 years ago. There's another reason Henry Kissinger recommended me to do this. That is the sustainability or climate change mitigation. If IEA tried to make the recommendation and policy discussion about coordinating energy policy to reduce carbon dioxide emission, you have to get China and India, because they are the largest emitter of carbon dioxide in the near future. So if IEA tried to be the energy security place as well as climate change mitigation policy platform, you need to get China and India. So these 2 reasons are the 2 sides of the same coin. Energy is a major part of the sustainability, because 60% or more than that of the carbon dioxide comes from the energy sector. Another important element which we now face is the natural gas. A golden age of natural gas is coming. That's what IEA said when I was executive director. Because of the North American gas revolution, shale gas revolution, demand of Asia for gas increased very, very rapidly, because it's a cleaner source of energy. It emits much less carbon dioxide than coal and oil. So many Asian economies for economic development needs gas. Russia was supposed to be a very stable supplier of gas, by pipeline to Europe and China, and also LNG. Japan contributes a lot to this golden age of natural gas by starting LNG import from Alaska about 50 years ago. And now LNG is commoditized. So Australia is now starting lots of gas production. So golden age of natural gas, as IEA said, is here until Russia invaded Ukraine. Russian problem, yes, Russia is certainly depending heavily on the gas exportation by pipeline to Europe, but Russia thinks it's dangerous only depending on the market of Europe. Russia tried to diversify the demand by starting LNG trading from Sakhalin to Japan and Yamal through the Arctic sea lane to Europe as well as Japan, as well as to Asia. Of course, pipeline to China is another very important element. So Russian strategy is how to reduce too much dependency on Europe, but rather to Asia. But by the invasion, the price of gas went very high in Europe, just as Asia too. So this huge jump, in fact, happened slightly before the invasion. Already Russia tried to control the supply through the autumn of last year and reducing the stock level of the Europe and preparing for the invasion by making higher prices of the gas and increasing their revenue. This is the hindsight, but definitely because of this invasion, things change very big. How much dependency Russia has on the European market for the fossil fuels? This is coal, oil. About half of the market oil exportation from Russia is to Europe, and 74% of gas goes to Europe, and coal about 30%. So very heavy dependence of Russia to Europe. While from European side, oil is about 30% of import, gas 45, coal 45. So in terms of oil and gas, certainly Europe depends on Russia, but Russia depends more on Europe. So if import ban happens, certainly Russia definitely suffer more than Europe. But Europe suffers also because European countries heavily depend on relatively cheap gas, particularly in Germany or Italy, may suffer a lot if the gas trade is going to be banned. Already Europe has banned the importation of coal and almost decided importation of oil. And something wrong happens further in Ukraine. Maybe gas import could be banned. Then what? This is a total energy security crisis for Europe. Maybe Europe is now moving toward LNG because pipeline is too risky for Europe because of Russia. So Europe is trying to import as much gas by LNG from Middle East, maybe United States, Australia. So there's a big competition of importing natural gas by LNG. So there's a shift from pipeline to LNG in the future. It's already happening. China is the largest. Japan has long been the biggest importer of LNG, but China surpassed Japan last year. And the United States is going to be the largest exporter of LNG this year. So the biggest importer and biggest exporter, they are US and China, are fighting for the hegemonic leadership in the geopolitics. Will this make the LNG market stable or more volatile? This is a very difficult question to tell you, but LNG should have a better future than pipeline gas, but it depends on the largest importer and largest exporter. This chart shows categorize the countries by import dependency of gas and import dependency of oil. So this blue area is those countries importing both gas and oil. This is the other way around. These countries are both exporters of gas and oil. China imports about 50%, 60% of oil and about 40% of gas, but in the future, 80% of oil and about 50% of the gas. India moves further. Japan, Korea import both 100% of oil and gas now. In the future, it doesn't improve anyway, so we are stuck in the top right-hand side corner. United States moves totally different direction. It's already the exporter of gas, and soon exporter of oil. So US geopolitical interest is much closer to Russia and Middle East. That is the reason Mr. Trump, President Trump, made a deal with Russia and Saudi Arabia. So, but for helping the security of oil and gas, what China, India, Europe are doing is building the much more dependency to the renewable energy sources. By increasing the dependency for renewables, these countries try to not reverse the imports of gas and oil, but at least reduce the increase of dependency on oil and gas from Russia, from United States, or from Middle East. So this is the country of these countries' energy security strategy by moving toward renewable energy. They are doing not only for sustainability or climate change mitigation reasons, but they are doing much more for the sake of energy security. Future is currently oil is the big source of energy now and in the past. But in the future, electricity is much more important than oil. So IEA's energy security was started for the oil supply disruption, but the future, we have to care more about the supply stability of electricity. The volatility of renewable energy, solar, wind is the issue. So how can we make the stable supply of electricity is the key element of energy security. Fatih Birol, he is the current executive director of the IEA, say that April of 2020, when the COVID-19 hit the world, it was a black April for the oil market because oil demand disappeared, but renewables increased even under such situation. So sole winner is a renewable energy, and he said maybe 1.5 degrees Celsius target could be much easier than before because of COVID. COVID accelerate the transition toward sustainable energy future. Another reason is that many countries announce the carbon neutrality by 2040, 2050, 2060, 2070. But many global corporations announce carbon neutrality by much earlier time horizon, like 2030, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook. So, and they ask the supply chain companies to do the same. So without using renewable energy 100%, no corporation, wherever they are, cannot join the value chain or supply chain of these mega firms. So this is the reason why Sony announced renewable energy 100% by 2030. Mercedes-Benz also require carbon neutrality by 2039. And BlackRock, the financial sector, is also pushing ESG investment. So, in fact, what's happening in the energy sector is driven by the demand side, not the supply side. Demand side requests cleaner energy and sustainable sources that no longer coal power cannot be really meaningful because nobody wants to buy such electricity in the future. So this is a big structural change in the energy transformation. So demand side decides the peak of oil supply. So this is the demand peak, or peak oil is very often cited by many oil specialists. And this guy, he's a Zaki Yamani, the former Saudi oil minister who died recently, said the Stone Age didn't end because of we ran out of stones. The oil age will be over because there is no demand for oil. And that is happening much earlier. IEA's net zero by 2050 report created IEA shock. IEA was created by the oil shock in 1974. So in return, the IEA created IEA shock to the oil producers by announcing this book, because they say oil could have been already peaked if 2050 net zero emission really happens. Gas may take much longer time because gas is necessary bridge resource to replace dirtier coal, for example. But IEA is making scenarios, and this net zero scenario is the kind of backcasting. If net zero happens 2050, what should happen before? 2040, all the electricity sector should be net zero. By 2035, internal combustion engine cars should not be sales after this. And in 2020, no new investment to oil and gas is necessary. That is what IEA announced. So that's created the IEA shock to the oil and gas sector. But to make this happen, the wind and solar should go 4 times more by 2030. Electric vehicles should be 18 times more, and energy intensity or conservation should happen much more serious, double of the speed of the current efficiency improvement. There are many scenarios in the IEA. This is the kind of business as usual line. Stated policy scenario is the policies which countries commit to achieve the Paris accord for the but it leads 2.7 degree increase. But now at the Glasgow, many countries announced additional pledges, like Saudi Arabia pledged to 2060 carbon neutrality. India announced 2070 carbon neutrality, reducing methane emission also by 30% reduction. So this leads to about 1.8 degree increase to the end of the century. So this is the really first occasion that IEA say maybe less than 2 degrees Celsius containment possible. But to achieve this, further reduction is necessary. And this is actually huge reduction is still necessary. What kind of technology is necessary? Already about 50% of the technology innovation is already in the market, but half are not yet. They include CO2 capture, hydrogen, small modular reactor, etc., etc. Many new innovation needed to make this happen. And when really 2050 carbon neutral happens, fossil fuel decline like this. What is the energy security in this kind of situation? Coal, oil, gas stockpile is not enough. Because oil trade is more than 60% now. In the future, still about 60%, 58%, if likely scenario happens. But if 250 net zero happens, oil share in the world energy trade is much less, 11%, while hydrogen trade is getting more important. So how to make strategic stockpile of hydrogen is a future energy security measure. And critical minerals could be very important. So oil dependency could be much less important than now, but OPEC's share increase. Saudi, we need still continue to depend on Saudi Arabia because Saudi is the cheapest source. While critical mineral like copper, nickel, graphite, lithium is necessary, and flexibility of electricity is another element for security. IEA say that investment to the coal and oil sector is almost the level for net zero scenario. So because of the ESG investors, oil and gas was not preferred. But for the sake of clean energy infrastructure, investment is not increasing, but not enough. To make net zero, this is the level, but actually it's only a third. So with these two things together, we now see the lack of investment to, especially to the natural gas, and gas price went high. So yes, we need clean investment for the future, but for the time being, as a bridge source of natural gas, we need to invest certain amount to natural gas, but eventually decline. So is private sector ready to invest to the sectors like declining in the future? Or if not, how can government or public sector should be involved for the allocation of investment? This is energy, very important, critical investment issue for security. Hydrogen may play an important role. Japan instituted or tried to make hydrogen economy by starting with Toyota Mirai in 2014. This is a second generation Mirai. But unfortunately, we concentrated too much to this car, and hydrogen refueling station, okay, let's build 100 of them, 200 of them. So we lost a decade talking with refueling station for fuel cell vehicle. It's triggered the hydrogen economy in Japan, but not enough. We are overtaken by China and Europe because of their necessity for hydrogen economy in the future. Prime Minister Suga's decision to go to carbon neutral by 2050 changed dramatically the Japanese energy future. We are now trying to reduce the power sector to the carbon free by 2050 and try to make industrial sector as much possible, as much as close to carbon free by electrification and hydrogen, ammonia, etc. This is the challenge, but METI announced industrial policy called Green Growth Strategy for 2050, and lots of hydrogen mentioned many places, because hydrogen can help the hard to abate sectors by replacing oil or coal by hydrogen. Direct reduction technology of steel making, or aviation sector, or even nuclear can help produce more hydrogen. Hydrogen, clean hydrogen can be produced two ways. One is by the water electrolysis, electrolyzing the water by clean energy, renewable energy. You can make so-called green hydrogen. By steam methane methodology, you can get hydrogen out of natural gas, and carbon dioxide from this process be stored underground with CCS. So this is called blue hydrogen. Whichever the color, we need hydrogen economy in the future. Currently, blue hydrogen is much cheaper, but blue hydrogen is cheaper, but renewables will come sooner. JERA, the joint venture of Tokyo Electric and Chubu Electric, started a very interesting idea, co-firing clean ammonia and hydrogen with coal power plant and gas power plant. By doing so, they can maintain the thermal power, which is a very important backstop or backup electricity for renewable energy sources, but reducing gradually the carbon emission, carbon dioxide emission. So this technology can be deployed to Asia, but to make this happen, supply chain is necessary. Green or blue, let's say, hydrogen or ammonia can be transported by either liquid hydrogen or MCH, which is called organic hydride, or ammonia. And this is a way to make a golden age of hydrogen. Chancellor Scholz of Germany just a couple of days ago visited Chiyoda Engineering's methyl cyclohexane, the organic hydrate plant, because he thinks Germany needs quickly the hydrogen or for clean up their industry. Because gas from Russia will be stopped, they quickly need to replace gas by LNG, but possibly hydrogen. So he is interested in the technology of MCH and discuss about that. Even within 20 hours of his very short visit, he decided to visit Chiyoda. So Germany is now moving clean technology of hydrogen, but may continue to use coal by mixing or co-firing with clean ammonia or clean hydrogen. Because of the Russian situation, Germany needs to change their policy of just simply stopping the use of coal. And also, if importation of gas from Russia be starting, it is tough, but if it starts, maybe Germany may need to change the policy of nuclear. That I will touch upon quickly. Another important element of using hydrogen is European idea of dedicated pipeline system. Europe has natural gas pipeline using lots of gas from Russia, but now they are trying to move toward hydrogen generated within the European states into this pipeline. So not only the grid connection and using more renewables, this is a very interesting second tier of clean energy network for Europe. And Germany is pushing this direction. This is the connection of the grid. Japan in Asia certainly may think about such kind of use of clean energy by connecting grid line with China or Russia. This is challenging in the current geopolitics, but in the future, Masayoshi Son, the president of SoftBank, is proposing this idea. This is the way. The problem of Japan is this lack of connectivity. Japan has two frequency zones, 50 Hz in the east and 60 Hz in the west. So when the Tokyo Electric lost the nuclear power after the accident, the Western companies cannot transmit electricity to the east because of this. Hokkaido Electric Company made a blackout of whole island because the lack of connectivity to Honshu. IEA has been recommending for years or decades of this, but never happened. It's because of the current 9 monopolies of the regional utilities. They want to maintain the status quo. They don't like competition. That's prevent the Japan to use more renewables. So to make energy security and sustainability, the first thing Japan should introduce is change the utility power market. This is a pipeline concept in Japan for hydrogen. Cost of electricity in Japan is highest because of the lack of competition, and stop of the nuclear power is another reason. So can nuclear come back? This is another important question which I want to touch upon. Yes, nuclear power may have good reason to continue because it is carbon free. But is it enough? Of course, another reason to do nuclear is for the sake of energy security. Because of the Ukraine situation, the Poland or Eastern Europe wants to start the nuclear power. Belgium changed their policy of phasing out of nuclear to maintain it because of this. France and UK starts investing more to the new power plant, and many countries now talking about new technologies. So nuclear may have a future, but the security and sustainability is clean energy is not enough. I argue that maybe the risk of accident like Fukushima must be minimized. Radioactive waste disposal is another important element for the sustainability, which Europe is requesting by their taxonomy, investment taxonomy, which is a condition that nuclear should satisfy. Another one is war, non-proliferation. Nuclear power is, another use of the nuclear power is the atomic bomb. If Ukraine maintain one of the nuclear weapon, which they return to Russia, Russia may not have invaded Ukraine. So not only North Korea, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, there are many possible smaller economies who wants to have a nuclear weapon to protect, to defend their sovereignty after Ukraine. So to maintain the nuclear power after Ukraine situation, it is getting tougher, and conditions is definitely much more difficult to do the nuclear. I think nuclear increase like this, but certainly renewables like drop is moving very fast for the net zero 2050. Yes, but nuclear, while renewable is moving like this, nuclear's growth in the past is not really so nice. Vaclav Smil, his very good friend of mine, said nuclear power is successful failure. Great ambition and hope and expectation was betrayed, unfortunately, by the accident. Cost of nuclear is high when you build a new one, but using the operating nuclear power, the cost is cheapest relative to other renewables. So restarting nuclear power in Japan make good sense. So Prime Minister Kishida said 1 gigawatt nuclear power may reduce 1 million tons of LNG importation. Certainly, the best way for Japan to contribute the current Ukraine crisis is restarting nuclear power and reduce LNG consumption and turn them to Germany. That is the best way for Japan to contribute globally at this moment. But it's a political issue. Restarting is still up in the air. We have 10 reactors which can be restarted, but very, very political. Nuclear power is very energy intensive relative to coal, wind or solar. And one of the concerns which I want to discuss now is mistake of Chancellor Merkel. I was invited to discuss the energy policy with German industrial leaders in 2009 when I was executive director. This is Madame Merkel. I asked her why Germany is not using nuclear power. She said, Mr. Tanaka, I am a scientist. Yes, she's a scientist from eastern part of Germany. And I know how important nuclear power and how to do that. But to do it in nuclear in Germany, Mr. Tanaka, please give me votes. That is what she said. So it's a political decision. And she's a quite wise politician than a good scientist. In the nuclear power in Germany, it moves like this. Because of the Chernobyl accident, it stops increasing. When Chancellor Merkel was elected, it's a big coalition with Social Democratic Party, so she decided to phase out nuclear. But when she won the election and come with the Free Democratic Party, she changed the policy to more use of nuclear. But when the accident in Fukushima happens, she changed again to phase out by towards the end of this year. Will Germany do that? Politically, they will, but if the Europe banned import of gas from Russia, Germany may have to return to the usage of the nuclear, even though politically difficult. So in my view, this is the biggest mistake of Chancellor Merkel in her administration and created the geopolitical crisis of today. Elon Musk say, well, the nuclear is very important. It's a critical, and this chart shows the energy power sector, let's say, dependency to the fossil fuel, and this is nuclear plus renewables. Germany is in the middle. Japan is using lots of coal and gas after Fukushima because we lack nuclear power. France is totally opposite, depending on nuclear power and very little dependency on fossil fuel. This is the energy self-sufficiency part. France is very good. Japan is very weak because of the lack of nuclear. Germany is in the middle, but if Germany stops coal and nuclear, certainly this is an energy security problem. We know that Fukushima accident was man-made, human error. We need to develop the fourth generation. We must go to the 3 additional conditions I said for sustainability, but there is technology as such. It is called integral fast reactor, which is developed in the Idaho National Laboratory of the United States. Because of its closed circuit, less risk of plutonium proliferation, less risk of accident because of passive safety feature, and easy waste management. The waste from this reactor will not stay 100,000 years, but 300 years. Then waste disposal could be much easier. So Japan, you cooperate with US National Laboratory for the versatile test reactor, which is exactly what I meant. Some criticism of Japan's nuclear policy by John Nye Armitage in the US. Does Japan desire to continue to be a tier 1 nation, or is she content to drift into the tier 2 status without nuclear power? I think Japan should join AUKUS and develop nuclear propulsion submarine. Not weapon, but nuclear propulsion submarine is definitely necessary for Japan to continue. We have to do more peaceful user and should not go to the weapon by controlling the plutonium in the international custody and offer North Korean governments to burn their plutonium in our light water reactor system. So reducing the weapon of North Korea for peaceful user Japan to reduce the plutonium. Let's see another element. I'm sorry, I have over time now, but last point for the energy transformation is the gender. In this chart, there's a correlation between the gender diversity and climate change mitigation tendency. Those countries with more gender balance has a better use of technologies and practices and policies for carbon dioxide emission reduction. And energy sector is relatively poor in terms of gender balance. Oil and gas has much less women's participation than renewable energy sector. With more women involved, the performance of corporations increase. So ICEF, which I'm the chair, propose, let's make the women's role in the corporation much more than that. Japan is one of the poorest and worst country of gender diversity. So by making women 30% of the board, that would change the governance, but at the same time, for the sustainability. Peace can be built more by women than men. That is what Sasakawa Peace Foundation's research with UN Women. For COVID-19, certainly women prime ministers, president, or governor may have better performance. So I am saying that if the president of Tokyo Electric Company had been a woman in 2011, maybe she could have avoided that tragic accident. I don't want to get into much details why I am saying this, but women is much more concerned about safety, security, and remember what kind of mistakes your husband made. I'm always asked by my wife what kind of stupid mistake I made since I married to her. But she did it not for herself, but for me and for the family, not to repeat the same silly mistakes. So women's role in energy and nuclear is so important that I formed the working group in Canon Global Strategy Institute only by women to recommend the vision of the future nuclear power. Yes, and also young generation is another important element for sustainability in the energy sector. We invited these young people to the ICEF platform. This lady, Rena Kawasaki, she's a 16 years old Japanese girl. She is the CFO of Ugrena Corporation, the famous renewable energy company. CFO is not chief financial officer. She is chief future officer of Ugrena and advising the company for the future. This is a way, very interesting way to engage young people. Here we have many young people, but how to get their voices heard. Greta Thunberg did a great job to make aware, yes, of young people's view in the world on sustainability. But corporation and government policy makers should do the same. Yuval Noah Harari, who is the author of Sapiens, said the problem of the current politics is there is no people who has the global identity. The big issue for the challenge for the current human being is nuclear war. Yes, Ukraine reminded us very seriously. Ecological challenge, yes, Glasgow, and tech destruction by AI. All these are global issues and nationalism cannot solve. So global identity-oriented leaders necessary. But Ukraine situation certainly make a solidarity in Europe. And I felt some hope that European leaders show a very strong collaboration in a short time against Russian invasion and show global identity. And that may come more in the future. And if there's good thing about Ukraine, this probably is. And I am very much optimistic that international collaboration may lead us to a much more sustainable and much more safe world in the future. I hope many of you, or some of you, share my view. Thank you very much for providing me the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you.